Thanks to Starta Art and our hosts today, Anya, Oksana, and Marcus. Marcus is not here today, for organizing this. I hope you had the chance to view this wonderful exhibition, and its curator is also here today, Veronica. And as far as I know, this is the first exhibition of fully devoted to video art at this gallery. So congratulations on that. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about how we preserve video art and other kinds of media art. And the main challenge for me was to think about what kind of audience will come to this talk, and I'm happy to see many friends here, and among them many IT people who probably are more knowledgeable than I am. But initially my intention was, as someone who worked for a long time with small nonprofit organizations, and only now had this chance to really delve into collection care at one of the most famous museums and see all these behind the curtains stewardship and taking care of media art. So I wanted to share my new knowledge with the audiences, and I'm happy that there are several artists in the audience, and this might be of interest, and we can talk about not only where to show your work, but also how to think about the future, and hopefully someday to get your work into a museum collection, what to expect, and how we as conservators preserve media art. So I want to make this as comfortable as possible, and if there is, since the audience is diverse, if you don't understand something, please feel free to interrupt me or ask questions. And if you think that you can add something to what I'm talking about, please do so. I'll be happy. So without further ado, let's start. And I would like to start with a little bit of history. Since this is a video art show, I thought that the best example would be, in this context, the most prominent example would be the work of Bill Viola, who started working with videotapes in 1970s. And we all know already his classical works, and I'm not going to get into detail here, but here is a story I wanted to focus on. In 1998, there was his survey exhibition at the Whitney Museum devoted to 20 years of his work with video. And this is the spread of the exhibition catalog. So while he was preparing for the survey exhibition, in the course of putting together the works, he realized, as he writes, with horror, that some pieces he produced less than 20 years ago were no longer playable in their original form. The tape on which they were recorded had deteriorated beyond repair, and most were made on formats that were no longer being manufactured. It soon became apparent that the exhibition project was fast becoming a restoration project. And so he writes, I made it my goal to have all the master videotapes for the exhibition transferred to state-of-the-art digital video, getting them off the analog format and into the digital domain, which would hopefully extend their life for at least another decade and presumably facilitate their continued existence for even longer. He then goes on, what viewers encounter when they see this work is not a unique original object, Rather, they experience. Do you still hear me? Yeah. Rather, they experience the exhibition copy. So it was about that time that the discipline of time-based media conservation has emerged. And the museum conservators constantly develop strategies and methods to get over ongoing obsolescence of analog and digital media. My next example demonstrates that the change of format or media carrier is just part of the story. In 1970, Bruce Nauman created spinning spheres, which shows the image of a steel ball rotating on a glass plate from above. And he was using 16mm film. It was first exhibited in 1970 at the Leo Castelli Gallery in New York, and Nauman planned to project 4 prints of the film simultaneously onto the 4 walls of an otherwise unoccupied cubic gallery. But the space at Castelli only allowed for this projection onto 3 walls. Later, 3 decades later, Nauman permitted the work to be transferred to video format. In the context of that migration, the Guggenheim team thoroughly investigated the technical and conceptual implications of medium for the display and significance of this work and presented a side-by-side comparison of the 2 artist-approved formats, 16mm that you see on the screen and digitized video. The 16mm projected image possesses characteristic properties of the analog medium, including grain, dust specks, scratches, and softened and rounded edges. Also present was the noise of the running projector. And then this is the image of a digital video, which is much brighter and has sharp edges, and its scanning lines and pixelation are clearly visible. At the time of the migration from film to video, the artist asked that an audio element be added to simulate the sound of a running film projector. And this is not a single example. There are several artworks by Bruce Nauman, originally presented on 16mm film. Upon their transfer to video format, they were supplied with the soundtrack of a spinning projector, noise, as the artist considered this an integral part of the viewing experience. However, facing younger audiences today, who have never experienced a 16mm film projector, there comes a question of authenticity of such experience. So let's think about how your kids will be experiencing this kind of soundtrack without knowing what the film projector actually is and whether it adds to this experience or not. But these were just historical examples for us to warm up, and I actually wanted to focus today on digital art, anything from video to software, any kind of art that we can name art as data or art as files. Since today, media art is mostly digitally produced. So digital content is at risk from the moment it's created. It's easier to make unnoticed changes to digital content than to traditional objects. And here is why. First type of threat is physical degradation of media carriers that we call bit rot. It can happen to any kind of data carrier, and the main cause of bit rot is gradual wear and tear of the storage media. Optical storage devices like CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray discs can suffer from environmental damage. For example, dust, heat, moisture can make the transparent plastic surface of the optical disc translucent. Then all magnetic media, including video cassettes and hard disk drives, are susceptible to magnetic fields. If the magnetic polarity of such drives changes, in the bit level. This can make data inaccessible. All such carriers need to be kept at a distance from any hardware like CRT monitors, loudspeakers, microphones, even motors. Then next thing is the so-called bit flip. Essentially, all digital data consists of a binary code, which is ones and zeros. And certain factors like lowering voltage, increasing heat, and even cosmic radiation can essentially flip a number and make the computer think that 0 is 1 or vice versa. And to a computer, it's an entirely different instruction. And so bit flip can cause computers and electronics to do things they are not meant to do. And the third type of degradation, or the third type of threat, is format obsolescence. Since there are formats that cease to be supported by their developers, like it happened, for example, to Adobe Flash Player or Java applets. And there is a number of examples of internet art projects that suffered from this type of obsolescence and are in need of being reprogrammed to ensure their ongoing performance. So now there is a lot of text here, which is part of the digital preservation policy I'm working on right now. But with that, I wanted to just illustrate the topic of this talk, which is called Transformation as Preservation, which alludes to the title of this exhibition in the first place. But in the second place, I wanted to clarify that there is no fixed object in our case, and we constantly seek to upgrade either the media carrier or the format or even the code, if the code gets obsolete. And so that's why we're talking about transferring, transforming, and essentially we call all of these types of manipulations migration. And the first rule that might be useful for everyone, not just to us as preservationists, not just to artists who work with media art, but essentially to any of us who wants to have their data preserved, is this so-called 3-to-1 backup strategy, which says that you should have 3 copies of your data stored on 2 types of media and keep 1 of the copies off-site. This is the principle that guides our work, for example, and ensures that our digital digital artwork storage is preserved. Not the storage, but the artworks in the storage. And I wanted to briefly touch upon preservation strategies at the museum and show you how we store and how we acquire media art. So this is just a random example of a beautiful video artwork by David Clairbeau. And here is how it's stored on our server. So, as a rule, museum acquires artworks in 3 copies. A copy for display, or the exhibition copy, and copies for preservation purposes, which are the native master and preservation master. And there are differences in formats of these copies, like exhibition copy is a compressed format, which is used only for exhibition or education purposes, but then preservation master is the highest format available. This is an uncompressed file which is exported directly from the production environment and has its timeline preserved and all the timeline settings preserved. I will not go into detail here. And this allows us, after a while, if we need to produce another exhibition copy, for example, to use this file and do it. But the exhibition copy at the same time is a reference for us to understand what's acceptable for the artist in terms of presentation, what kind of color space, compression, and so on is acceptable for presentation of this work. This little device that looks so big on the screen, this is a forensic bridge, and which is used, by the way, by criminal investigators, and it's not a really nice illusion, but anyway, we're using it too, just to make sure that we don't leave any trace on the hard drives that artists send us. Because when we acquire artworks, we prefer them to be sent to us on a drive, and not via some link to third-party clouds and so on, because there can be different variables that can introduce data loss or corruption, such as network interruptions, file download expirations, and so on. So when we receive this hard drive, we connect it to our capture station using this forensic bridge, which allows us not to leave any trace on the artist's data, and at the same time to check the integrity of this hard drive, whether there are any bad sectors or something like that that could potentially introduce corruption. And a few words about our work with artists. Besides collecting, we do a lot of discussions, and we sustain our relationships over time, and we discuss all the important parameters that artists have to convey about their work to have it better preserved. And for that, we have the so-called media questionnaire, where we ask all kinds of questions about how the work was produced, what kind of software was used, what are the preferred formats, what are installation parameters, what is the equipment that artist wants to use, whether there is something that is dedicated to this artwork, as, I don't know, like a CRT monitor or a particular type of projector and so on, or whether it's a variable, and how flexible the artist is in terms of these presentation parameters. Why equipment is important? Here is one example of our recent test installation of an artwork. It is not exactly a media artwork, although there is equipment involved. This is a conceptual art piece by Israeli artist and who was originally a sculptor, Buki Schwartz, and he's known for his video structures. So the work doesn't actually have any physical components. We don't have anything in our storage related to this work as a physical art object. Rather, it's just a concept. And the concept is to use a closed-circuit video system with a camera that faces the corner of the room, which is taped by black tape. And then this camera directly transmits the image to a monitor, which also has some pieces of black tape. And when the visitor comes and enters that room and that particular spot, the visitor is caught in this box. So it's a very funny work, and the reason why we were testing it, its installation and presentation, is because it was first exhibited in the 70s. And in the 70s, obviously, the artist used a black and white CRT monitor. And today we have all other kinds of technologies that could be potentially used. And so now we need to discuss, since the artist is dead, we will discuss with their estate of what's acceptable in terms of presenting this work, how flexible they are. Do they want to transmit this feeling of the technology from the 70s together with the work, or rather they are more aligned on the very concept, and its presentation mode can be whatever. That's a question. Please notify me about time, because since this change of equipment, I'm not tracking my time anymore. So if it takes too long, just let me know. 20 minutes, okay. And we need to make a workshop as well. So let's see. So I hope so far it's interesting, so I can keep talking. Okay. Then another example is 3D video work. I was going to talk about some newer technologies here, simply to point out that newer technologies doesn't mean that it's a reliable technology, because they change constantly, and what the artist perceived as their preferred presentation mode during the museum acquisition may become obsolete in, I don't know, in 5 years. So here is an artwork by Annika Yi that's called The Flavor Genome, and it's a 3D video. And the artist has their certain preferences on what equipment to use. She requires it to be presented with 3D glasses that have active shutter. And so now we need to delve a little bit into details about 3D technology, because there are several types of it. Like first, and I guess the most familiar to you, is the, how do you call it? Anaglyph. So you have seen, of course, those glasses that have a cyan and red lenses on them. So that's the anaglyph technology, and it's the oldest and the easiest one. But then there is also these active shutter technologies, when your glasses are actually active, and the way it works, it shuts your eyes one by one, so that it gives you the illusion of a 3D. And another technology would be to use the projector as an active source of 3D, and your glasses would be passive. So they would just perceive whatever the projector is transmitting. So why I'm talking about it here, since the artist already stated her preferences, and there is certain equipment that she wants to use. The thing is that the equipment is linked to files that we receive, and those files are produced in a way that's specially configured for this certain kind of equipment. If, for example, in 5 years, active shutter glasses are not available anymore for some reason, they want to discontinue them, they move to another technology, to use this artwork with polarized 3D, we would need to take the original master file and reconfigure it to make a new exhibition copy video that's compatible with another technology. And now a little bit of text again, and this is another side, important side, when you think from the artist's perspective, an important side of coordinating your acquisition with the museum is its legal side, because to do all our preservation efforts, we need to make copies. And by default, when we just have this acquisition agreement or deed of gift or whatever that makes the museum the owner, that doesn't automatically say that we can produce copies for that. We need a non-exclusive license, which allows the museum to produce those copies. And essentially, like even a server backup would produce copies. So we need it in any case. But the more important thing here, the more important clause is the so-called long-term preservation and variability clause, which says that we are, as the museum, we're in constant dialogue with the artist, and we want to collaboratively decide, well, the decision is on the side of the artist, but we really need them to decide on what's the future of technology we are going to use with this artwork after a while. And that's why we need this document for. Then I also brought a couple of examples of when we receive something that's different from what the museum requires, like this uncompressed video as a native master and exhibition copy and so on. There are different cases, and some artists rely on collaborators, for example, to produce their video work, and they don't have access to the original production environment, and they cannot deliver us this uncompressed copy. And this is the case of Zilia Sanchez, a Cuban artist, very prominent and very old. And she's, in the first place, she's a painter and conceptual Caribbean minimalist. And what she does is what you can see on the right upper frame. Unfortunately, I don't have a separate picture. So she stretches canvases so that they become these sculptural objects. And this object on this picture is called Soy Isla, I'm an island. And this is a documentation of her performance when she was offering this island to the sea, and the sea was giving it back. And so what we received as a video work documenting this performance is actually a Walgreens produced home video. And this is a service where you can upload your digitized or pure digital files, and it produces a DVD for you. And another file that we received from the gallery is a digital file that was edited in a different way, and that was also digitized, but on a different kind, from a different kind of carrier, and it's totally different. The time code is different. The sequence of the scenes is different, and even if it's visible here, there was a typo in her name, Sylvia instead of Zilia, and this typo went away, but then there appeared this time code on top, and there is a difference in how the sound is produced. So now the museum has an open question that we unfortunately cannot address to the artist because she was not actively present during the editing process, and now due to her advanced age she is not available to us, and it will be a collaboration between curators, conservators, and the gallery that represents her to understand which of these two files is a better way to represent her work. Another case is another performance/video by Alexandra Meir, which is called First Woman on the Moon. And this is an opposite example because this is a picture that illustrates that performance. And this is the opposite example because you see how much material we got together with the artwork. And well, this talks about more about collaboration between the artist and all the institutions that hold their work, because what she did after 20 years of having the work exhibited throughout different institutions, what she did is she reached out to all of them, asked, what do you have, what kind of materials do you have about this work? Everyone sent her their materials. She compiled them in one batch and sent them back. So she actually made life of curators and researchers much easier herself because she is like, in a way, authoritative. So here is all the information I compiled. You don't need anything else. Here you go. And with that, I wanted to continue into our sort of little workshop format, and there are several tools that I wanted to show you that can essentially help you to preserve your digital data long term. Unfortunately, we had this equipment hiccup in the beginning, so the computer from which I'm presented is not mine, so I'm going to try to manage to show everything I wanted to show. So the first tool, the first thing I wanted to talk about is the checksum function. And there are many people in the audience who know everything about it, but for those who don't, a checksum is a little string of numbers and letters, like symbols, which is a unique digital signature for any file of yours. And if, for example, you follow this 3-to-1 backup strategy rule and keep your data on 2 separate drives, and in a year you want to check whether everything is okay, and you run this checksum function and compare it to the original checksum function you had. If it changed, something happened. So let me get out of the presentation mode and show you first of all, there is a simple tool which has a graphic user interface, and it's as simple as this. And let's maybe get some random file. Like this kitten. want just one kitten. And save it on the desktop. Okay. And let's run the checksum function. Sorry. So there are different types of these functions, but the easiest one is MD5, and this is the one we are using as well. It simply tells you that all okay, but you can also open it with text edit to see this actual number. Here it is. And let's say you had your kitten duplicated. And I don't know what's going on with the right click here. Sorry. Правым ближним. Да, я хочу сделать duplicate. Merci beaucoup. So if we make a checksum hash right now, it's going to be the same. But let's change something. Let's say some kind of corruption happened to this file. And I'm opening it as a string of numbers and letters. And essentially, this is how the computer sees this kitten. And we're going to change something here blindly. Nothing changed much. But anyway, let's do the hash. And now it's different, which means that something happened to your second file and you want to do something about it. Maybe have your first copy again duplicated and remove the second copy. You can also do it easily with the command line tool, but I'm not going to go into that detail now, and show you another instrument which I forgot to download for this talk. Not because I intentionally forgot it, but because this presentation computer is different. So luckily I have it in my presentation, so let's just do like this. So this tool is called Bagger, and it was developed by the Library of Congress, which has a lot of important assets to keep. And it's also a free open source software that you can easily download. And what it does, it saves your files. This is this user interface, which is really simple. What it does, it saves your files in the so-called bag. Bag is essentially just a folder. But what it does, it generates the hash function for all the files you saved in your bag and stores it as a text file, as something that I just showed you with MD5. And you can, using this tool, you can automatically validate your bags and check whether everything is okay. If, for example, a file disappeared from your folder and you run validation on Bagger, it will detect that something happened and tell you what the error is. This is how it's supposed to look like. So after you save it, this is your kitten. Then this tag manifest contains MD5 hash for your kitten. And this is the tag manifest for the bag itself. And I'm not sure I'm gonna go into this, but I wanted also to briefly talk about saving, sharing, and distributing your video works. Because before this talk, someone asked me what are the platforms where you can actually store your files. And I know for many video artists, they use Vimeo, for example, that you can share, or you can have a restricted access on some of your files and not to share them, but there is essentially so much more. So first question would be whether you want everything to be stored on your hard disk drives, local storage servers, or you want to go into the cloud. Many people who know that I worked at a museum ask me whether we store anything on the cloud. And I also asked that question to our IT department. What's better? Is it the server that we ourselves own and run, or whether it's some kind of external third party that manages our data and all the responsibility is on their side? But then how do we control that? There are many questions regarding that. But of course, for just as common users, all of us use clouds, and that's pretty convenient and pretty reliable than a hard drive that you use once and then it's stuck forever in your closet and you forget to validate your files in a year. That's also a concern. So I wanted to talk about precisely those platforms that media artists can use not only to store, but also to collaborate and share and distribute their data. The first is Frame.io, and this is a platform that we use at the museum to exchange our exhibition copy files between our conservation department and media arts, who uploads all of that onto our presentation equipment. And it's collaborative, and you can use it to do any important comments, track feedback, and so on. Another thing that I wanted to introduce is this one, which is really new, and this is a platform that is more like a marketplace. And when we talk about marketplaces for media art, the first thing that comes to your mind is NFTs, because of this NFT boom. But like not all the artists work with NFT, and it's pretty questionable, let's say, and also it has a huge environmental impact. So there are many alternatives that I would call something that's similar to Spotify because it's a streaming platform and it's a platform that allows you to get royalties for your work. And yesterday we talked with Veronica, who is the curator of this show, and she told me that she envisioned this kind of platform like 5 years ago, and fMRI, this is what it's called. And I shared this one, which is developed also by people I know, and it's not released yet, but it's already available. It will be released closer to the fall. And this is a platform which you can use to not just to store your videos, but to also share them with the audiences, and curators may use this platform to compile digital exhibitions out of everything that's available over there. And this is one of the ideas to make it possible to have exhibition projects not only in the physical space but also in the digital realm where they belong. And to finalize, just a little bow to history and to those institutions that were already there thinking about how to share artistic work, and this is one of them, Electronic Arts Intermix, the legendary institution that came up with the idea to collect works by video artists, and they have a huge collection now of all the legendary names, like the same Bill Viola and Vito Acconci and whatnot. And the idea behind that is that whether you're a curator or an educator and you want to use this work in your show, or for education purposes, you can rent it, and you pay a certain amount of money, which is of course much less than acquiring a video work, and this money goes to both the artist and the institution that operates all that. And a similar institution based in Europe is Lima. I didn't mention that, but Electronic Art Intermix is also involved in preservation, actively involved in preservation. So is Lima, and they constantly address the same questions that I was talking about today, and much more. So I guess that would be it for today. And apologies for that little hiccup with the workshop, because that was something I didn't expect. Let me just roll over to the first slide, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have or listen to any comments. Maybe you want to contribute with something that I didn't mention here today, so please.
Okay, so just to mention the name of the artist, the name is Ural, and he's a part of the show, so you can enjoy the Does anyone else have questions? Comments?
In the case of the DVD having multiple copies, why is it important to choose one DVD?
That's a good question. Probably because we're a little biased and have our own preferences. But yeah, that's a great question, because this work is on the loan right now, and it's been exhibited at MCA Chicago, and in fall it's going to be in Boston. And we're thinking about just getting in touch with every institution and asking what is their presentation equipment, how they envision this artwork in the show, and then based on what they tell us, provide them with one or another copy. But in case with MCA, for example, it was very well, we didn't foresee this, but they showed this work on a video wall. And the work that has so many compression artifacts, it can be really bad for the visitor experience. And since we didn't envision that, we started to think about whether we need to be more strict in what is the copy that we offer to the institution.
So what do you do in cases when the state says, no, we can't consider it?
Sorry, can you come again?
If the state says, no, we can't modify the work in any way, but the college is going on, what do you do in those cases? You just say it's gone?
That's another great question. If we can't modify the work, and here I would think that we talk about formats, right? Because, like, if we can't modify the work, but we still have this original equipment, we would just stockpile that equipment, like those old CRT monitors or whatever, to be prepared to show it for as long as possible. But in terms of formats, I never encountered such a case that the artist tells that's the format and that's it, because it's the artist's interest to have their work to be shown. So yeah, but maybe there are cases like that I don't know about.
Are there any rules to presenting the work that was created on an obsolete format when there's not a foundation, and to specify how it should be presented, and the artist is already deceased? How do you present the work that doesn't have any indication of how it should be related to the audience?
Thanks for this question. It's I guess that would be then the decision that a museum takes, but also takes collaboratively, because it would require a lot of historical curatorial research to see how the work was originally presented and what happened to it throughout time, and what was possible in all those iterations that the work was exhibited. And then the conservation would also contribute to the dialogue and say what's possible now and what not, and so on. So that would probably, if there is no estate, no foundation, and the artist is no longer there, then it would be the museum that takes this decision collectively.
Thank you.
With all the artists who collected all different variations of the work in one folder. And I have a question, which file is used in this case?
Probably I wasn't clear enough. It's not the variations of her work. She submitted her work in the required formats, but these were all the research and ephemera and everything else, really, like the list of and the range of approved steels that you can use for promotion purposes, things like that, the supporting material.
So, for all of these works, it doesn't add documentation. What are the consequences of that? Because you have legal agreements, you have cyber security insurance, things like that for these works, or is that something you don't really think about at this point?
Do we have a cybersecurity insurance? We do.
So,
Well, legally, it is the obligation of the museum to steward and keep and make sure that nothing happens. But I guess it would be also the infringement of the copyright if someone else who stole that work uses it. And that's why it would be, I guess, easy to file that kind of case, because when you can clearly see that something is stolen, and with all those traces we could clearly see that, then it would just make a case of theft and copyright infringement. Thank you. I guess that's it, and we can just finish this presentation and have a little bit of wine and just talk. Thanks.